Every day, we automatically reach for a spoon, a plate, or a fork without giving it a second thought. These objects have become such an ordinary part of life that it's hard to imagine a world without them. But thousands of years ago, none of them existed. So, how did people eat? What did they drink from? Where did they place their food? And who came up with the very first spoon? The answer is far more fascinating than you might expect. Archaeologists have discovered that the history of the spoon stretches back thousands of years, while objects resembling modern dishes appeared long before the Egyptian pyramids were ever built. Surprisingly, the earliest humans didn't really need tableware at all. Their diet was completely different from ours. They ate berries, nuts, roots, fish, and freshly hunted meat, most of which could simply be held in their hands. There was no reason to invent plates, because nature had already provided everything they needed. In a way, our hands became humanity's very first eating utensils, and if you think about it, they still are. Even today, hundreds of millions of people across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East traditionally eat with their hands. In many cultures, this isn't considered primitive or impolite. It's simply the proper way to enjoy a meal. Everything changed when humans mastered fire. Cooking transformed food forever. Meat became softer, vegetables easier to digest, and entirely new meals appeared, including soups, stews, and porridges. That created a completely new problem. Try eating a bowl of hot soup with your bare hands. It doesn't work very well. For the first time in history, people needed tools that could carry liquid food from a container to their mouths. That simple challenge eventually led to one of humanity's oldest inventions, the spoon. But before carved spoons appeared, people relied on whatever nature offered. Large leaves served as plates. Pieces of tree bark became serving trays. Flat stones held cooked food. Huge seashells worked as bowls. In some regions, even dried turtle shells were used as natural containers. Everything depended on where people lived. Communities near the sea often collected large shells that were perfect for holding food or water. People living in forests preferred wide leaves or carefully shaped pieces of bark. Others discovered that when large gourds dried naturally, their hard outer shells turned into lightweight bowls. Believe it or not, some indigenous communities around the world still use dried gourds for exactly the same purpose today. Then came one of humanity's greatest technological breakthroughs: pottery. For many years, historians believed that ceramic vessels first appeared around 10,000 years ago. Then, archaeology completely changed that timeline. Researchers working in East Asia uncovered pottery fragments that were more than 20,000 years old. That means humans were already experimenting with fired clay during the last ice age. Those early vessels looked nothing like the smooth bowls and plates we use today. They were thick, uneven, heavy, and often decorated with simple fingerprints or rope patterns. But they worked. For the first time, people could boil food, store water, and cook meals much more efficiently. Another surprising discovery concerns the spoon itself. Archaeologists believe the spoon appeared thousands of years before the fork. The reason is simple. A fork isn't very useful for soup or porridge. A spoon, however, can handle almost any soft or liquid food. As soon as cooked meals became common, spoons quickly became essential. The earliest examples were made from whatever materials were available. Some were carved from wood. Others were shaped from animal bones. Coastal communities often used large shells with naturally curved shapes. Some cultures even carved spoons from deer antlers or mountain goat horns. What's remarkable is that many of these ancient spoons look almost identical to modern wooden spoons. Place a 3,000-year-old spoon next to one from a modern kitchen, and the differences are surprisingly small. It seems humanity found the perfect design very early, and never had much reason to change it. Of course, not everyone owned beautiful tableware. Ordinary families usually relied on simple wooden bowls, clay dishes, and bone spoons. The wealthy lived very differently. Ancient Egyptian nobles owned beautifully carved ivory spoons decorated with birds, fish, lotus flowers, and other intricate designs. Some were so elegant that archaeologists still debate whether they were actually used for eating or simply displayed as luxury items. One final fact surprises many people. Flat dinner plates, the kind we use every day, appeared much later than most people think. For thousands of years, deep bowls were far more common. The reason is surprisingly practical. Ancient meals were usually soups, stews, porridges, or slow-cooked meat. A deep bowl kept food warm and prevented liquids from spilling. A flat plate simply wasn't very useful. Sometimes people didn't use a plate at all. Instead, they placed food on thick slices of stale bread. The bread absorbed meat juices and sauces throughout the meal. Afterward, it was either eaten, shared with the poor, or fed to animals. In other words, biodegradable disposable plates existed thousands of years before plastic was ever invented. If the spoon became one of humanity's earliest eating tools, the fork had a much more complicated journey. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine eating a meal without one. In fact, when forks first appeared in Europe, many people viewed them with suspicion. Some even called them the devil's utensil. The reason was surprisingly unusual. During the Middle Ages, some religious leaders believed that God had already given humans the perfect tools for eating: their hands. Using a small metal fork seemed unnecessary, overly luxurious, and in some cases even arrogant. While this wasn't a universal belief, it slowed the fork's acceptance for centuries. Only a few hundred years ago did forks become a standard part of European dining. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, China followed a completely different path. Instead of adopting forks, Chinese culture perfected the use of chopsticks. The reason had little to do with tradition and everything to do with practicality. Food was usually cut into bite-sized pieces while it was being cooked. Once it reached the table, there was no need for knives. Chopsticks were lighter, faster, and perfectly suited to the small portions already prepared by the cook. Historians believe chopsticks have been used for more than 3,000 years. Interestingly, they were not originally intended for eating. The earliest chopsticks were cooking tools used to lift hot pieces of meat or vegetables from boiling water. Only later did they become everyday eating utensils. Australian Aboriginal peoples developed their own unique solutions. Unlike civilizations that relied heavily on pottery, Aboriginal communities used the natural materials surrounding them. Large seashells often served as bowls. Wooden dishes were carefully carved from tree trunks. Sheets of bark were folded and tied together to carry water. Even naturally formed knots in eucalyptus trees were sometimes shaped into small containers. One wooden bowl could serve several purposes during the same day. It might carry water in the morning, hold berries in the afternoon, and be used to prepare food in the evening. That level of practicality was essential for survival in Australia's harsh environments. Far to the north, Arctic peoples faced a completely different challenge. Trees were extremely rare. Instead, they created bowls and utensils from whale bones, reindeer antlers, stone, and ivory. In freezing temperatures, even blocks of ice could temporarily serve as containers for food and water. What seems unusual today was simply the smartest solution available. Archaeologists have noticed an interesting pattern. The materials people used depended almost entirely on the environment around them. Near the ocean, shells became bowls. In forests, wood dominated. Across open grasslands, animal hides and bones were common. Mountain communities often carved stone containers. Rather than one civilization inventing tableware for everyone else, similar ideas appeared independently across different parts of the world. There is another fascinating detail. Archaeologists rarely discover ancient wooden spoons. That doesn't mean people didn't use them. It simply means wood decays over time. After thousands of years, most wooden objects disappear completely, while stone, bone, and ceramic survive much longer. Because of this, the archaeological record can sometimes give a misleading picture of the past. In reality, wooden tableware was probably far more common than the surviving discoveries suggest. Tableware also reflected social status. Ordinary families owned simple clay bowls and wooden spoons. The wealthy dined very differently. Ancient Egyptian nobles used beautifully carved ivory spoons. Roman aristocrats often ate from silver dishes and drank from decorated metal cups. Owning expensive tableware became a symbol of wealth and prestige, much like luxury watches or designer products today. Perhaps the most remarkable fact is how little some designs have changed. A wooden spoon still looks almost the same as it did thousands of years ago. A ceramic bowl serves exactly the same purpose it always has. Even the basic shape of many modern dishes would be immediately recognizable to people living thousands of years in the past. Some inventions become obsolete within a few decades. Others survive for millennia because they are already close to perfect. The humble spoon belongs to that rare category. So the next time you sit down for a meal, take a moment to look at the plate and spoon in front of you. They may seem ordinary, but they are the result of thousands of years of human creativity, experimentation, and adaptation. Long before factories, machines, or modern technology existed, our ancestors were already solving everyday problems with remarkable ingenuity. And perhaps that's the most fascinating part of the story. Some of humanity's greatest inventions aren't the biggest or the most famous. They're the simple objects we use every single day without even noticing them.